Hello and welcome to another instalment of our occasional podcast called I Wish I Hadn't. I'm Dave Hill.
And I'm John Wyatt. As you can tell from our names, David and Jonathan, we were born in the 1950s, so we've had many years to accumulate embarrassing moments which we now feel happy to share.
The dictionary defines regret as a sorrowful remembrance, a sense of loss. But we're not in the business of sorrow and loss here. We're dealing with those things in life that we might wish had been otherwise, but which we're now prepared to own up to.
Do you remember going home for Christmas after the first term? I remember that, going home and feeling very sophisticated.
Yes, you certainly thought you were a grown-up then,
Yeah,
didn't you? Yes,
because I'd got some new clothes. I got a stylish pair of shoes, a stylish pair of trousers, and I remember sort of going back to Beminster and seeing people that we'd been with, and feeling terribly grown up and
slightly superior, I would imagine. As well.
Rather superior. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, it was. I mean, the thing I remember most about going home was that I had to go home on the train always, and it meant, because I had no money, I always had to walk from the college to the Shrub Hill station in Worcester, which is quite a long walk through the town. Now, being young and fit, I was able to do it, but I always remember thinking it's a long way to walk, and it was, and it was the same. If I came back on the train after a holiday, I had exactly the same thing to do, which was fine, as long as I didn't have a hugely filled rucksack with me, or, as happened later on in my college course, a great big cardboard box with my stereo in it, which I couldn't leave at the college.
No,
in my room in the hall of residence, because during the holidays those rooms were used. Other people slept in them for courses and things.
Yeah.
So I would literally have a massive rucksack and a massive cardboard box that I would take through town all the way to the station, and the same coming the other way. I look back on it now and think I couldn't do it now. I just couldn't do it.
Well, you stayed in the same room all year. Of course, I left Mr. Kidwise, went home for Christmas. I think I'd been staying with an aunt for about a week up to Christmas because I didn't want to pay the Mr. Kidwise anymore. And after Christmas, went back and moved into our flat. Now there were three of us, but it was in a house which was about 3 stories, and there were other tenants upstairs. And we had the downstairs room. Robert had a room at the front, and then Steve at the back, and then I had the sort of living room. That was a disadvantage because it meant that Steve and Robert had to go to their bedrooms to enable me to go to bed at night. And they liked staying up quite late, and I'd get tired, and I'd be sort of pleading with them, sort of whining, please go to bed. I want to go to bed. And we had a kitchen and a bog out at the back. We had a shared bathroom with the rest of the house upstairs. So there were, I think that upstairs there were 2 sisters and a brother who lived in a flat, and then at the top of the house was a strange man who lived on his own. So you were sharing about 6 people sharing the bathroom.
Yes.
And in our kitchen we had a terrifying gas geyser thing to heat the water. So you probably have a sort of a cursory flannel wash there in the morning, and a bath maybe once a week. But the gas geyser was really frightening because you would try to ignite it, and sometimes it didn't take. And I can remember running out of the room because I thought this thing was going to blow, and running into the garden and waiting for the bang explosion as the thing exploded. But upstairs, as I say, there were these 2 sisters, and one of them had a boyfriend with whom she'd fallen out, and I can remember him coming round one night in a furious mood, and calling they were called Lily and Marion, and Robert and I called them Lolly and Moron. And this guy came round, and he was shouting out for one of the sisters, and he tore one of the banisters out from the stairs. We're going to use it as a weapon. And Robert sort of retreated into his bedroom, and heard a noise in his wardrobe, large sort of wooden wardrobe. Opened the door, and there was one of the sisters cowering inside his wardrobe, saying, "Please don't tell him where we are."
Where we're hiding. Yeah.
So yes, I mean that was an interesting
Yeah,
house, but
yeah.
it was a lot of fun for the year.
Yes, yeah.
And then it came to the end of the year. We had finished our first year. I'd done minimum amount of work, really, rather like you.
Yeah.
And we went home for summer.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Long summers, because of course we broke up earlier than schools and things. Like long summer.
Broke up
When
in
I
June, didn't you? And
I could go and work in the Wimpy Bar or the grain dryer or something like that to earn some more money. Now, in the second year, I have got a lot of notes about the second year because I worked in the second year,
Well,
so
me-
it wasn't as
me not
interesting.
either, no.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I got onto the dance and disco committee and helped run the free-sided discos. They were great fun.
Yes.
And drunken Friday nights.
Yeah.
Because of course, living such a long way away, Dorset to Worcester, 160 odd miles, and having no transport and not much money, whereas a lot of people would go home to Birmingham or somewhere for the weekend, I was always in college at the weekend, so I was quite happy to be part of the disco scene and help run those. And then you'd have the boring Sunday where nothing was open, because of course in those days nothing was open. Sundays were so boring in Worcester where I was.
Yeah.
And then of course the bar, the student union bar, didn't open till 7:30 in the evening that day. And so it was a really long, drawn out day. The one thing that I remember most of all about my second year is that I had to do a project, a sort of an insect study project or animal study project, and I chose to put in an old plastic sweet jar, one of those big ones I managed to get hold of, some earwigs.
Yes.
I decided I would study these earwigs for this project I was doing. Now, I thought that I'd probably got a pair of earwigs, female and a male.
Did you sex them then?
I couldn't sex them, I just guessed really. Someone had said, oh well, the female's got the pincers at the back are a certain shape, etc.
Yeah.
So I went along with that. Now, I studied them and I had to write notes on it every day, bits of food and stuff. I had to write notes on it every day. So it's a proper study. I think I put various bits of vegetation in there and a bit of sugar and stuff like that. And let me tell you that basically over a period of probably about 5 weeks, these earwigs, they were alive, but they did nothing of interest. Not a single bloody thing. And every entry was, and I'd given them names or something. Eric's done this and so. And in the end, I had to make it up. I just made it up. And I thought, why did I bother? I could have made all this up anyway and just written down, they danced the tango or whatever, because they did nothing. They
One of them knitted a sweater.
They scuttled about. One might hide under a bit of grass or something and then appear again, or one would disappear for a bit. And eventually, I just thought, this is ridiculous. So I took the top off, I just had holes in it anyway for air, and tipped them out back into the ground outside.
You should have just chosen more, tigers or something.
I should have. It was all I could get my hands on at the time, and I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. So it was so nobody ever knew this, but I completely made up this project that.
Did you get a credit for it?
I just got a pass. I think it was.
Okay.
But pointless. That was really.
Yeah. Well, like you did the discos, I used to do the light shows with Robert and other friends, which meant standing on a table, setting up on a table, 2 tables, these projectors, and then you had those. Do you remember those sort of paint things that you put in front of them, which
with oil,
oil sort of filters, so it made
very Pink Floyd,
very Pink Floyd, exactly. And some of the bands hated them because they really didn't like them. But this is what you do. And we also did them at discos.
Yes.
You do them at the History Society discos and the Geography Society disco, the Gay Society discos. I remember doing them.
Yeah.
And I'd also wrote some things, or started to write for the college newspaper, doing sort of reviews and that sort of thing, and worked, I suppose. Wrote essays. Went to seminars. Didn't work terribly hard. And I suppose a couple of times I must have come up to see you.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we did have visits like that. I mean, I mean, I think second year I had I shared a room again. I shared a room with, and that was great because I shared a room with a chap called John Walker who had a demanding girlfriend back in somewhere in Shropshire, so that every weekend I had the room to myself. Now that, as a second year student, was a real bonus. Of course, and my own room, basically, a big room, which that wasn't always a load-in, shall we say? And
no, you must have been cutting a swathe through the female.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Not as much as I'd like to have done, but yeah, it meant that I at least had my own room there. And visits from friends were always good fun, and when you came up.
Well, I came up with a friend called Peter, remember? We went to see cricket, I think.
We did, yeah. We went to see some cricket at Worcester.
I'm not sure you ever came down and stayed with me.
Well, I must have come down at some point, because I can remember coming down to a flat of your. I mean, I went down to a couple of your places you lived in London, and certainly one of them I know was when I was a student, because I can remember it being quite a narrow entranceway and a hallway.
Well, that would have been the one in Tufnell Park.
Yeah. Were you a student still then?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I must have come down then.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I couldn't always afford to come down. That was the thing.
No.
It was money was always tight in those days, and you had to think about what you spent it on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And then, of course, so the second year passed reasonably uneventfully, because it was a case of trying to hang on to make sure I made it to the third year, and I did. I passed okay the second year, and they said, yeah, it's fine. Third year's coming up.
Yeah.
And the third year seemed, and the teaching practices were a bit more demanding because they were longer and more work had to be done.
Yeah.
But the social life just continued as it always had done, really.
Did you work through the summer of the college vacation? I think remember you didn't you claim dole or something in one holiday?
I think there was one where I did. Someone told me I could actually claim some dole money as a student.
That's right.
And I did claim some.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a huge amount, because by the time it came through, the summer holidays were almost over, sort of thing. But I remember going to Weymouth to register for it at the time.
Right.
Because someone had told me I could.
Yeah.
I think the most sort of pungent thing that happened in my third year, or the final year, was after a field trip to the Gower Peninsula, and we had to collect various specimens. I can remember collecting sort of razor clams and
earwigs.
Not earwigs this time, because they weren't on the seashore, but various sort of bits of crustaceans and bits of seaweed and stuff. And then taking it back at the end of this field trip and putting it, thinking I've got to do something with this and write about it, and then went out for a drink or something, put it in a plastic bag inside a cupboard, and probably forgot about it. Then went home for an Easter holiday.
Right.
And so like 3 weeks later came back and opened my room, and it was horrendous. The smell in there was absolutely horrendous, because basically it was rotten dead sea creatures, seaweed, and salt water, which is a great combination, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have claimed it was the ozone, but it really wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't actually got on to the third year.
Oh,
yet.
sorry,
I mean,
I've
that's
jumped
all right.
ahead
You jumped
there,
ahead. I mean, the end of the second year, as the end of the second year came, because at the end of the first year we were in the flat in Tufnell Park, and over the summer holiday when we were away for 3 months, we managed to sublet the flat to a couple who had run the bar in the student union. So that worked very well. But the next year, Steve, one of the three of us in the flat, was going to go to Austria because he was studying languages, and it was a 4-year course, and the third year you actually spent abroad. So we knew we would have to let the flat go. So we let it go, and I just thought, well, I'm going to have to come back in the autumn and find new accommodation. And I spent that summer working in the plastics factory, which I think I mentioned in the previous.
Good old Abbott Brown.
Yeah, well, no, the one in Ely.
Oh, okay, yes.
And making money there, which was okay. I did that for about 6 weeks. It was a pretty horrible job. It just determined me never to work in a factory. and then came back for the third year. And of course, the problem there was that I had nowhere to live. And what had happened was that the Rent Act had come in, and landlords had removed a lot of their properties, and so accommodation in London was almost impossible to find. So I slept on the floor of the college for a couple of nights when I first got there with my suitcase. Then I borrowed flats from a couple of people that I knew through Jackie. And eventually I just decided, I was still looking with Robert, and he had a sister that he could stay with, and I decided that this wasn't going to work at all. And I said to Jackie's mum, I'm in my third year, I don't need to come into London very often, I only have to be in college 2 or 3 days a week. Can I move out and live in your house?
Yeah.
Which I did. So I actually commuted in to college from out of London throughout my third year.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it worked okay.
Yeah.
Because it just was impossible to. And I could stay with friends in London, who did have places. I mean, some of them were in squats. It had been that difficult to find anywhere to stay.
Yeah, I mean, I had my own single room in the third year, because that was the thing about the 3 years at college that you did. It was that you were guaranteed a single room in the final year.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
I never had to look for accommodation. It was always provided. And I say I didn't get much of a grant, but then again, my accommodation was paid for and my food was paid for should I want it. So it made it that it was only my socialising that required my money, really.
Yeah.
They were smaller because I'd been in these double rooms that I'd virtually had to myself. It was a smaller room, but it was a better appointed one, really, and it was a nice room that I spent quite a lot of time in, and that was quite pleasant. I mean, having almost got given the chop at the end of the first year, by the end of the third year I'd done what I needed to do, apart from one sort of fairly major project which I was supposed to take back with me at the end of for the Easter holidays, I think it was, and so I think we had 3 or 4 weeks off at Easter. But during that time, I had an interview, 2 interviews. I interviewed in Birmingham to get onto the teaching pool, and what I had
Were they
to
fixed
do.
up for you, or
You had to apply for them,
Yeah.
and I applied for these 2. And one of the things I had to do to take back with me at the beginning of the Easter holidays was this major project I had to finish. Otherwise, I wouldn't get the marks to pass. And I managed, sort of rushing to get home, etc., to get home and realise that I actually left this whole project in my room at college. And I thought, the Dead Sea Creatures had sort of gone by then, but this is again something I did. Well, I think I told my mum. I didn't tell my dad though, because I knew he would have actually hit the roof. And so I worked out that if I was going up on the train to Birmingham for this pool interview that I was going to have, that I could detour coming back via Worcester from Birmingham. That I think it was something like an hour and a half that I could run and walk from the station to the college, not actually knowing whether I'd be able to get in the room, whether it would be locked or anything. Hopefully pick up this project, put it in my bag, run and walk back to the station and get on the only train that would then take me back to Bristol Temple Meads and then to Maiden Newton. And I did it, dear listener, I managed to do it.
Good.
I was absolutely sweating and shattered by the time I did it, but I can remember the feeling of sitting on that train, pulling out of Worcester Shrub Hill, thinking, I can't believe I've done that. If I hadn't done it, it would have all been for nothing.
And you wouldn't have been a teacher?
I wouldn't have been a teacher. No. I wouldn't have been able to persuade anybody that I've done what I should have done. It was a real nightmare moment, I have to say. But I did it. Managed to do it because I was young and fit then.
Yeah.
Unlike now.
Yeah, I mean, for me also, the studying got much more serious in the third year.
Yeah.
And you knew there were exams coming. Exams never bothered me. I never sort of worried about the sort of thing. I had to, for my final thing, I had to write a 3,000 word thesis
Mhm.
for philosophy, which was quite hard work,
Mm.
that seemed quite difficult. Um, and the exams, I stayed with friends while I was doing the exams because the exams were held in London. Um, and I was sort of looking forward to that. Um, I hadn't worked all the way through the third year. I mean, we had, I remember, um, we'd run a sort of a joke election for a friend of ours, a rather gormless friend called Pete, um, to be the social secretary,
Mm.
which had started out as a joke and ended up being serious, and he only actually just missed the election.
Yeah.
But I remember a sort of a leaving party we had. We decided to have a bad taste disco as a sort of an end of term thing, playing terrible music. That was quite successful. But yeah, I did my exams and then had to decide what I was going to do next.
Mm. Mm.
You, of course, knew, didn't you?
Yeah, well,
'cause
but,
you
yeah.
had
By
your
that time, I
course
mean,
marked out for
and
you.
at the end of it, having thankfully passed and got a pass mark, I had a place on the Birmingham pool of teachers, which meant I was going to get a job.
Okay.
Which was quite nice. I mean, I didn't know where it was going to be. I didn't find out until the actual, the summer holidays following on from it, really. So it was a case of wait and see what was going to happen.
So that
next.
would have meant that you left college and you started at the next school term.
The very
you were
next school
saying?
term, yeah.
Okay.
Very next school
in
term.
a primary school.
In a comprehensive school,
A
actually,
comprehensive
in the
school, okay.
in the middle of Birmingham,
Mm.
and living in Perry Bar, which is where you and others came to visit me. Then.
How did you find that place? Living
Well, I mean,
accommodation?
I had one of my good friends from college, Alan, lived a lot closer to Birmingham than I did,
Mm.
and said, "Don't worry, I will find us some accommodate. I'll find us a house
Oh,
to
right.
share,"
Good.
which he did, and he then phoned me up and basically said, "Look, I found a house. It's in Perry Bar. We can get to the schools we're going to from there.
Yeah.
It's sharing with two girls. We've all got it's two double rooms. We were
Mm.
downstairs, and he said, "Is that all right with you?" I said, "Absolutely, that's fine." Because it meant I didn't have to look for anywhere.
And do you
then.
remember what you did in that last summer before you
The last
started
summer,
work?
1975, I think that's when I went to France, actually.
Oh, of course it was.
Yeah,
Of course it
when
was.
Rob and myself
Yeah.
went on one of our
Which we've
French
mentioned
sojourns.
yes,
yes,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, for me,
absolutely.
of course, I didn't have a summer because what happened was that I sat my exams and I had some careers advice.
Mm.
We had an interview with a careers advisor at the Polytechnic, and she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know. I mean, here I am. I'm 21 now. I've done
Mhm.
3 years. I mean, I hope I would get a degree, but I've no idea what I want to do." She
Yeah.
said, "Well, what do you like?" I said, "Well, I like reading books."
Mm.
And she said, "Well, what about book publishing?"
Mm.
I said, "That's a good idea." So I got a copy of a magazine called The Bookseller,
Mm.
and in there was an advert for wanted an assistant editor in
Yes,
a
yeah,
company
yeah.
in North London, and I applied. And I had an aunt who had worked in the book
Mm.
publishing trade, and she said, "Oh, I know the managing director there.
Ah.
Doesn't do any harm to mention my
No,
name."
absolutely not. No.
So I went along for the interview, and I said, "Oh, you probably know my aunt, Barbara." And he said, "Oh, yes," he said.
Mm.
And at the end of the interview, I had the job.
So, did
The-
you know anything about book editing at that point?
No.
No. So,
absolutely
did you have to
nothing.
learn on the job, or did you have to bluff your way into it?
Well, I mean, I learned how to do proofreading and sub-editing because
Mhm.
that's what Jackie had done.
Yeah.
So she had books, and I could just learn the sort of symbols for doing that.
Right.
And I kind of taught myself to type a bit.
Yeah.
So I'd made some preparation, but basically, I mean, I was an assistant editor, so you just, basically turned up, and this was your job. But it meant that I did my last exam, and I think I got the acceptance for the job on the morning that I did my last exam,
Oh wow.
and they wanted me to start as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So I had no summer holiday, and I pretty much.
straight into it.
But the other thing, of course, I then had to do from living out in Essex was then find a new house.
Yes.
So again, I went off on the old, run around of going to places all over North London, some pretty grim places, and going to a place I remember, the horrible smelly houses, and other people saying you can't bring anybody back here, and I eventually found a place which was ideal, and shared with 3 other guys, and that's where I moved into after literally like a couple of days after finishing my last exam, and began my job, straight into work.
Straight into work. I mean, it's yes. I mean, I can remember the interview that I've probably said this before. The interview I had, or when I went to the school they'd sent me to, and the chap there, the head said, I'd like to offer you the job, but you'll have to have your hair cut, because I had very long hair at the time, and I said that's not a problem. And he said, fine, you've got the job. So I went away and I had about 3/4 of an inch cut off the bottom of my hair. So I still had long hair at the start, but it wasn't a problem in the end. So
okay.
So there we go, John. We've sort of gone right the way through.
We have gone right the way.
Our whole education.
I'm sure we missed out.
I'm sure there are bits we've missed out.
Things, but 3 years later, we were. All our education and the world of work, opened up with open arms and said, come on in, Dave and John.
Come on in, chaps.
Yeah, it's fun. The water's lovely.
Yes. Little did we know.
Little did we know.
At the end of that fairly factual but filled time with talking about our further education, there seems to be a knock at the door, John. It sounds like a knock from someone in pointed, turned-up slippers to me.
Is it the cleaner?
It's not the cleaner. I think it might be the genie,
genie.
who has turned up thinking, well, you've taught for a long time, chaps. There must be something that you want to remove from your experiences.
I think the genie must be getting pretty pissed off with
us. God, yeah.
Because they have acquired an awful lot
of stuff that we wish we hadn't done.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with it, but we're glad to be rid of it.
So what would you like the genie to remove for you, John?
Well, there are actually quite a lot of things in all that history, but I think possibly I would like the genie to remove the fact that I had to be in the bed and breakfast place with the boiled egg for breakfast, which was on a noisy road. And it was very, very cold, because I didn't mention that. I think I said that the heating was only on for an hour. I can remember being so cold that I would have to climb fully dressed into bed in the afternoon when I was there, because I was trying to work on an essay.
Yes.
And I was so cold that I would have to get into bed.
That's.
And I would like the genie to remove that particular moment.
Yes. Well, for me, it's got to be. I really do wish that the genie could remove the fact that I completely forgot to take my final project home with me at the beginning of the Easter holidays, and had to do that mad dash across Worcester to the college and back, and just allow me to take it home with me, and then just sit comfortably on the train from Birmingham back to Bristol Temple Meads and to Maid Newton without a care in the world, because I knew I had all my stuff I needed. So thank you, Jeannie, for bearing with us and removing these things that certainly gave us the jitters as we were going along.
Really had a genie.
Yeah, absolutely.